All right. So welcome to Biohacker's podcast. This is our first episode in English. We've been doing this work for a year now in Finnish, and it was just about time for Biohacker Summit that's going to happen in Helsinki, Finland on the 23rd to 24th of September to do this in English. And we are going to interview a number of guests from Biohacker Summit. Today we are going to have Dr. Max Moore, but also Ben Greenfield from Ben Greenfield Fitness Podcast is coming along, as well as Katal Gurin, who's been doing self-tracking for 9 years. So there's a lot of interesting interviews coming along. So subscribe to the podcast and follow what biohacking is all about. So just let's get straight to the interview. So today I'm interviewing Dr. Max Moore. He's a strategic philosopher and the CEO of Alcor Life Extension Foundation that deals with cryonics. He's a co-founder of the Entropy Institute, and he has written a number
Extropy Institute.
Extropy Institute. He's written a number of seminal papers on the transhumanist philosophy, and already since 1990s, and has been sort of central in pioneering the transhumanist movement. And he has also been teaching philosophy at University of South California, and definitely considering his day job now in cryonics, his dissertation that also touched the nature of death would be definitely interesting. So here we have Max Moore. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So would you like to expand a little bit from your background? So how did you get interested in all this transhumanism and life extension and super longevity?
Yeah, I've been asked that question so many times and I still don't have a very good answer because it's hard to explain. Some people say, oh, there's this book I came across one day and it just changed my whole way of thinking. Or my parents brought me up, or my friends had these ideas. But I really can't think of anything like that. It was almost as if I was born a transhumanist, like there's a transhumanist gene, because from the earliest ages I can think of, I was always fascinated by the idea of overcoming limits. As I like to tell people, when I was 5 years old, I watched the Apollo 11 moon landing, and I watched every space launch after that. And I was fascinated by the idea of getting beyond the gravity well, getting out into space, building space colonies, expanding life beyond Earth. I was always interested by the idea of living longer. From well before I stopped growing, I started taking supplements and was really thinking seriously about life extension. I also wanted to figure out how to overcome biological limits. It seemed to me that the fact that our human bodies are sort of frail and age and damaged easily, and our brains don't really work that well, we're pretty stupid really, that was unsatisfactory to me. So initially, in my early years, when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, I studied all kinds of different approaches that were really non-scientific. I looked at transcendental meditation. I looked at different kinds of religion. I looked at what you might call the occult or New Age, depending on where you are, psychic stuff. And as I developed critical thinking skills, decided none of that really seemed to work. So I started realizing, well, maybe science and technology are the way to go. So I started looking at those. But all those years, there's the same basic drive, which the term extropy neatly encompasses, is the drive to overcome human limits, to become something more than just human, not to accept our lot as given by evolution.
So just to clarify a little bit, did you grow up with technology? So were your parents or in any way involved with all this technology?
Not in the least. No, my mother was essentially a secretary, personal assistant or secretary. My father, I say my father, my biological father, I don't know, but the father who raised me until he died when I was 11 was originally a builder, became a construction site manager. So absolutely zero technology, zero. Actually, very little academic background. Apart from my mother's father, nobody in my family before me had even been to university, let alone to go to Oxford. So again, it's kind of very strange. It's hard to explain environmentally how I came to form these interests. Just a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, just reaching out and seeing ideas out there in the world through books primarily, and discovering what the real possibilities were.
having such a like systemic view on the human enterprise, like looking at the human body almost like something you can upgrade or improve or sustain uh, for periods that are not necessarily normal or natural, like people would perhaps approach this topic, although they are definitely something in our nature that we can extend, and we can apply our knowledge and understanding of how things work uh, in our own benefit. I mean, that's what we have been doing for the whole industrial revolution as well. I mean, technology enabled us to have more time and have better infrastructure to do what we do, like the whole healthcare system and basically food and logistics and everything. That just lets us, focus on thinking and creating things. But why would you go on the side of philosophy instead of engineering, building things?
I think it's just a matter of where my natural talents lie. I'm not actually very good at sitting down and focusing on a lot of the tiny details that I might need to work on equations in physics or advanced mathematics or engineering. I tend to be better at big picture thinking, organizing, that kind of thing. So that's really where my talents lay. My first big interest, apart from the future in general and learning bits and pieces of technology, my first real interest was economics. That was something that really appealed to me because it was a very systematic way of understanding human behavior. And so I really studied that in great depth when I was 15, 16, 17. And then as I got to the university level, I started losing interest because it became obviously more of an academic game. It became something where where economists wanted to be mathematicians or physicists. They would write these long papers full of equations that really related to nothing in the real world. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of scientists in the social sciences fall into that trap. So it seemed to be no longer relevant. So instead, I started asking more generally, well, okay, I'm studying the role of the economy, government, and finance, but why do we have the government we have? What justifies that? What justifies taxation? What justifies government having these powers over us? And so I started thinking more about political philosophy. And as I thought about political philosophy, that drove me into ethics, and that drove me into metaphysics and into epistemology, and all those other areas that kind of flower out from that. So technology itself or scientific research, yeah, you might say, why aren't you doing scientific research? Why aren't you studying how to extend the human lifespan? Well, probably because I wouldn't be that good at it. There's other people who do a better job. So I'm trying to focus on my strengths, which are really organizing, forming the big picture, and understanding more the social side of things.
Oh, that's interesting that you brought up the economics and so on. I was just thinking when I was having a flight back from Hungary yesterday that if you think of like the nation state, at that level, problems are easily solved with nuclear weapons between and it's all about the boundaries and the territories and collecting taxes and so on. It was natural for the enterprise or the company to emerge as a more, you could even say, more advanced structure for solving and dealing with problems. Today's companies and enterprises are international electronic organisms that just spread their tentacles around everywhere, and they run on capital. And for an enterprise to be trusted and to work with them and do business, it's all about stability. It's not about threatening others around you with other than new products, and it's all about winning the interest of the global markets. So it's definitely interesting how we are sort of, as societies, we are coming up with new structures to reorganize the resources that we have. I think it was Buckminster Fuller who devised this kind of number for how we are able to harness the resources of the planet. So if number one is that we can completely harness the power and resources of this little planet we are at, so an estimation was that it's sort of, we are at 0.7. So we are sort of gearing towards being more energy efficient and more efficient in utilizing our resources. And I see that that is now expanding to the human being as well. So we start to look at ourselves. How do we make the most out of this piece of meat sack that we sit in. And
Exactly. There's a time when, for hundreds of years, especially since Bacon and the scientific method, we begin to systematically alter the external environment. But only really in the very last few years or a couple of decades have we started to think seriously about the possibilities of altering the internal environment. And of course, we're still doing it in a very crude way with pharmaceuticals and implants. But we can expect a revolution of the same kind of the industrial revolution, where we'll hack our bodies and then re-engineer ourselves. And a lot of people still find that disturbing and odd and unnatural, but clearly it's not unnatural. It's what we've always done. It's just that we've always done it to the outside world, and we haven't had the tools to do it internally. But now, as you've been saying, we're beginning to develop that technology. So there's nothing remotely unnatural about biohacking or re-engineering the human being. It's just a matter of doing it carefully and cautiously, obviously.
Absolutely. And thinking of information that is like the stuff that we deal with today, information society, that was basically invented or formulated as a term in Japan. I think it was in the 70s, 60s or something, when they were looking at how can we build a society for a society for which its gross product, most of it comes from immaterial products and information. That's how they came up with that term. And now information is becoming primary. There is companies that are purely working in an immaterial world, like Google, which is now reorganized as Alphabet. And if you look at the human body, even we are information. It's now DNA that wants to replicate forward. It's in the electric signals in our nervous system. It's in the chemical messengers between our cells. It's in our communication. It is sort of something that we definitely, now that we explored what is outside, and we applied that to agriculture and industrial revolution, we now have a new revolution that's going to happen on a human level in a very, very concrete way and direct way. So how would you think about the human sort of enterprise, sort of like a machinery that is possible to upgrade and see as everything that's outside?
Well, I wrote a letter, I guess 1999, something called the Letter to Mother Nature, which is pretty easy to find if you Google it, which was given at an Extropy Institute conference in Berkeley. And in that, I kind of wrote this polite letter to Mother Nature as a kind of a symbol, saying, thank you for all the wonderful things you've done for us. Thank you for these amazing bodies of trillions of cells that cooperate and work and allow us to live. But we've come to an age where we have to take over, Mother. We've grown up, and it's time for us to take charge and to make some redesigns. And then it goes on basically to list a set of demands, basically. Again, it's all kind of metaphorical, but these are things that we need to change about ourselves. The fact that we expire, we age and die and expire, is just completely unacceptable. Nature did that because there was no reason for evolution to build human bodies that would last indefinitely. It takes a lot more feedback, a lot more self-repair, a lot more difficulty to have something that's self-sustaining. It's like trying to keep a car that's 60 years old in good repair. Well, you can do it, but it takes some work. And nature had no interest in doing that beyond the age of childbearing. That doesn't mean that we have no interest in doing that. So we're beginning to do that. We have that capability. And in fact, I think it's contrary to what some bioethicists say. It's not only not wrong, it's the right thing to do. This is kind of a moral opportunity. I wouldn't say an obligation, because I'm not a big believer in obligations. That's not really my moral system, that people are obligated or must do things. But I think it's a moral opportunity to do better. That it's kind of lazy for us to sit here just to stay human beings with all our flaws and warts, with our tendencies to hate people who are different from us, and to go to battle with them and to kill them and to harm them, and to suffer bouts of rage and depression and anxiety. That's just lazy, and it's a bad excuse to say, oh, but it's natural and it's God's will and it gives our lives meaning. That's just nonsense. That's just a terrible rationalization. It's really our opportunity and our moral responsibility, if anything, to use our intelligence and to apply it to ourselves, cautiously, obviously, to take some precautions, not to go nuts, but to upgrade ourselves. I think that's actually a very good thing to do.
So basically, we have this, we have the resource, we have the opportunity right now to do something that wasn't necessarily possible on this planet before. and it would be lazy not to go for it. So what would you say to someone who is saying that things are too complex for us humans to understand, and would if it's already what we see in China? They modified the human embryo. They wanted to treat an uncurable disease that you could be born with while the child is still as an embryo, and it created side effects. It created things that they didn't expect. So they modify, they fix one thing, and suddenly something else happens elsewhere because the whole system is not mapped out and it's not understood on its entirety. So what would you say to someone who is, saying that, hey, come on, it's too complex world. We still don't understand it. We just discovered that the lymphic system actually extends to the brain, and that there is channels for that also in there. So and that have been hidden from science for decades now. So
Right. Well, how do we know this? Well, because we went ahead and tried something. The thing about that kind of objection is, well, yes, things are very complex. Things are a lot more complex than we know. And as the common saying is, the more we learn that we don't know. Well, how do we learn? We don't learn just by sitting and contemplating. So philosophy alone is not enough. We have to have research. And that means sometimes trying things with uncertain outcomes. And that's just the way it is. Steven Pinker, the writer, did a column just a couple of days ago on bioethics, and he made a point that I thought was very good. Really, he was saying that all these bioethicists seem to do, well, 99% of bioethicists are always saying, stop, slow down, don't do this, let's have a committee, let's wait for a couple of decades. Well, no, because people are dying in the meantime. People are suffering and dying in the millions, and they seem to ignore that side of things. So I think rather than the precautionary principle, which is basically saying don't try anything for the first time, which really means we can never make any progress, let's throw that out. Let's use something more like the precautionary principle. We can only learn by doing. Now, yes, we can plan ahead a little bit. We can try and understand systems. We can run simulations where possible, and those are going to get better and better. We'll have better and better in silico simulations to look for side effects. And we get better at monitoring systems. We'll begin to monitor things even on an individual neuronal level to see what's happening. So maybe we can intervene sooner if there is an unforeseen side effect. But yes, there will be problems. There will be. There's no doubt about that. There's no point denying that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't go ahead cautiously in making progress. Otherwise, we will never learn. That's something that has to be accepted and understood. There is no perfect world. There is no risk-free world. That doesn't exist. And there's no reason to think it ever will exist. But that's not an excuse for doing nothing.
Absolutely. That's very well put. So I mean, the experiment is key. It's in the center of learning anything, and how can you know if you don't try? That's definitely. And in science, there is this term serendipity, and a lot of inventions have actually come out of experiments as a side effect. So you were searching for something else, and you discovered something totally different. And that applies to post-it notes. These guys actually tried to create the strongest glue in the world, and they created the worst glue in the world, and it became the post-it notes that we use in the office, down to how Teflon was invented, to some, I think penicillin also came out of researching some of these things. So it's you're absolutely right.
It's amazing if you think back historically, the number of things that people were against at the time, which now we take for granted. And I think Steven Pinker mentioned some of these, like vaccinations. And of course, there are still some people who are against vaccinations, but vaccinations that save huge numbers of lives, but were originally considered to be something dreadful and unnatural. Transfusions, replacing organs with other people's organs. What a terrible, unnatural thing to do. If God had meant us to do this, he would have given these extra organs. Anesthesia. Obviously, it was God's intention to punish women for Eve's sin, so women should suffer in childbirth instead of taking painkillers. In vitro fertilization was, people thought was going to produce an army of zombies, and now it's a commonplace procedure. So it's interesting how these things that are very strongly opposed, the same things we're hearing now about the kind of the transhumanist plan, the biohacking plans, we've heard those things before. But once we've done a little bit, it becomes familiar, and we see that, hey, this in vitro fertilized child who's now walking around seems to have a soul, seems to be perfectly normal. In fact, I'm going to marry her next year. Those problems seem to go away. So it's like the people who say, oh, I wouldn't want to live more than 120 years. If we knew there was a treatment, if we had a treatment that would let you live indefinitely in perfectly good health, I can pretty much guarantee almost all those people would suddenly change their mind and would probably deny they ever disagree with it. They'd say, oh, no, I always thought that was okay. So,
And that is, by the way, something that is now discussed in a very similar way in the context of artificial intelligence. So it was Stephen Hawking and a number of scientists around the world who warned us of the dangers of AI if it gets out of hand. Sort of almost like these kind of doomsday scenarios from Terminator movies, and that people have been growing up with. And I mean, of course, understand it in a way. If you're on a battlefield and you get killed by a AI-controlled robot, who is responsible? Is it the one who owns the robot? Is it the one who programmed it? Is someone who is remotely somehow involved in moving it around? Is it who is responsible in that situation? So what can you say about the ethical side of these things? So I guess as humans, we are afraid of losing control. With AI, in a way, you can no longer blame anyone specific if it does something wrong. You know, if a car by Google that is autonomous drives over a child, who's responsible? Is it Google? Is it the programmer? Whose responsibility is it in that case?
yeah, those are perfectly reasonable questions, and they certainly have to be addressed, and that's whole new areas of law that we have to develop. I don't have any, I don't try and define answers to those very difficult legal questions right now. I think we have to work those out. But there's even some precedent for some of those, because, of course, we, for centuries, have hired people to do work for us, and let's say they do something really wrong, then there's the question, well, are you responsible because you hired the person, or are they responsible because, you know, they acted against your general orders, and you should expect some kind of good judgment from them? That becomes a difficult question. But again, these should not be excuses not to move forward. But in the cases of, for instance, Google's cars and self-driving cars, it's probably a good idea for us to be thinking ahead about those things. And of course, a number of people in the transhumanist community are doing that. A good example is the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, where I have some good friends there, such as Anders Sandberg, and they spend a lot of time thinking about these issues. So there are some cases where we can do some planning ahead, where we can really see the trends. We won't know exactly how these things are going to work or exactly what year this will be happening, but we can see the general trends, and it does give us a chance to think ahead a little bit and work out some kind of ethical guidelines. But those are going to be difficult. Yeah.
I heard some of these discussions being conducted in the context of open source movement and free software and so on in the end of the 90s, and the whole hacker ethic and the movement around it. And one of the sort of principal ideas there is, let's say, of computer systems, is that if you want to make a secure computer system, you can't obscure it. You can't sort of hide the problems that are there, but you should open it up so that people can tinker with it, people can play around with it, they can hack away and try to penetrate and get into the system and try to break the system, because that's the only way through which you can create a truly secure computer system in a way. So I guess it's the same in a way here, that people should be able to play around with AI. People should be able to work with biotechnology and gene manipulation and so on. Definitely, we're going to have some casualties on the way, and we're going to see some problems arising. But humans are pretty good at coming up with solutions in those cases to create the safe nets, sort of a social conduct almost in some cases, or just embedded in the fabric of the network itself, that enables these things to be used in a more safer way. I guess, I mean, we wouldn't have roads unless we had those experiments going on when we first built roads.
Yeah, no, exactly. We create new problems with new technologies and new methods, but we create new solutions. And overall, I mean, it's pretty obvious. You look at the sweep of human history. Overall, we've done quite well. I mean, people love to gripe and complain about the state of the world, but the fact is, this is the best time in the world ever. I mean, it seems bizarre to me that seems to be a controversial statement, but it's not. I mean, just seriously go back and look at history at any time in history. When in the past would it be better? even if you're one of the wealthiest people, generally, even the Roman emperors didn't have toilets, they didn't have painkillers, didn't have anesthesia, they didn't have antibiotics. It's really, this is the best time there is. So that means we've solved more problems than we've created. So people right now are saying, "Oh, we're going to destroy ourselves with global warming, or this, or that, or AI." But come on, we've managed so far. There's no point stopping here. Let's keep going. Let's solve more problems. We can probably do a better job of foresight. We can look ahead better because it's really a very recent area of knowledge to think about the future. And it's been kind of dismissed as being science fiction, but now people are realizing that a lot of science fiction is becoming true in some form or another. And there are ways of thinking more systematically about future possibilities, creating structured scenarios and planning ahead for those. So we could do a better job, I think, of actually heading off some of the obstacles, some of the things that will go wrong. But we do have to move forward. And we can't, it's a big mistake to portray the future world as some perfect place where we've solved all the problems, because that's not the way it's going to be. Some of them will change things quite drastically. AI does have the potential to transform the way we live completely. Now, a lot of the discussion goes on as if AI is one thing over here and we're something separate over there, and they're going to diverge. That's not necessarily the way it will be. It may be that we will actually combine more with our technology, and it will be so much us versus them. It's very hard to find good examinations of realistic extrapolations of the future. One quite nice one I would recommend, actually, by an Alcor member, although it's not a book about cryonics. This is his first book by Jim Halperin called The Truth Machine, in which he imagines a society in which we've invented a device just basically you can wear on your wrist like this, and when you're talking to someone, if they lie to you, it'll light up red, and if they're telling the truth, it'll be blue, and if it's kind of something where they may be not sure if they're lying, it'll be somewhere in between. And basically, the social pressure becomes such that everybody has to wear this, and he follows through the implications of that, and it transforms everything. Because just imagine that you can't get away with lying ever. That's gonna change things. So it may, if you did that right away, it would be a disaster, because the police would probably arrest you for all kinds of minor offenses, but then there'd be a lot of pressure to change those laws. So if driving above the ridiculously low speed limits is going to get you in jail every day, because who doesn't go over the speed limit ever? There's going to be a lot of pressure to change those laws. So you can't just extrapolate one thing. Once we tell the truth, we're all going to be in jail, because it'll change other things.
I guess it's the Japanese would be definitely excited about that. I just some time ago I read that they have now some wristbands that basically signal to the environment that if you are straight or homosexual, for example, and it's only a matter of time to switching that to something like that signals to the environment other kind of gestures of communication that are not non-verbal, and even tell something about the state of your body. What you just mentioned as something where you signal to the environment your current, if you're lying or not. These kind of things can perhaps be already be possible to extract just with infrared light. By just look at the cameras today, can pick up your heart rate from distance, and so by going to the infrared range, I can see what your heart rate is. Then I can look at the distance between your heartbeats. That gives me your heart rate variability. That can be an indicator of your stress level. So if I'm having a negotiation with you, I might be able to see if you're bluffing, and if you're stressed out, or if you're in a calm state, and if I should ask for a raise, or what I should do. So I believe that technology will change human communication and interaction greatly. A friend of mine just wrote an article for one of the largest newspapers that the most popular sex companion today is the computer. All the online services and so on. And as we dive deep into virtual reality, and you can do whatever you want, people might opt for the technological alternative more than other things. And so how would you reflect on the state of human communication and how it gets tangled with technology? And we just walk on the street looking at our phones. We are no longer in the physical space. We are not in the digital space either. We are just somewhere in between. We are dodging people as they come by. on a whim, and it has already changed definitely how we interact, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'm being an old fogey here, but I actually don't like that. I don't like the way people are locked into their little screens, and in many situations, it can often be quite rude. And people on telephones who speak loudly, and psychologists tell us that's particularly distracting when you can't hear the other side of the conversation, because it gets your brain trying to fill in the gap, and it's very hard to focus. So, but many of these issues, I think, are transitional ones that we work out. We evolve new norms. The technology itself evolves. It may be that we won't have handheld devices anymore. We may have contact lenses that project certain things, and maybe less intrusive, that we can kind of see through them. We'll still see the environment more effectively. So I think we need to work out new protocols. It gets interesting when you start thinking about some of those possibilities. If you're wearing virtual reality contact lenses, there are also kind of augmented reality lenses. You could, for instance, change the way you see certain things. Like if for instance, you are averse to seeing people who are grotesquely overweight, then you might have an algorithm that rewrites that so you don't see them. Just wipes them out of existence or makes them look like someone else. So, or someone, if you know someone, maybe you have a colleague or someone who has an incredibly annoying voice, maybe you'd have that internally modulated to something more pleasant. So that opens up all kinds of interesting possibilities, which is almost the opposite of the truth in a way. It's kind of filtering reality. And that'll require a lot of new protocols and ways of dealing with that.
And that raises the question, what is reality? I mean, that is what is unreal and what is real. I mean, those are real experiences, right?
The experiences are real. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about reality on different levels. We can talk about, like I talked about the person with the annoying voice. Well, obviously there is a certain physical reality. There's the actual amplitude of the sound waves and so on. And there's the way it affects our ears. But then, yes, there's the internal reality of what we actually perceive and the emotional effects it has on that, on the hormones and neurochemistry it releases in us is a separate reality. So, we have to disentangle those different parts of what reality is, and the physical and the virtual, the internal biochemical. So reality is a little bit complicated and becoming more so.
So people can, in the future, they can pretty much wake up in the morning and they can decide what type of reality I'm going to immerse myself into today. And it's something that you can use technology for. So you don't have to use medication. You don't have to use sleep deprivation, meditation, drugs, whatever. You can just go on the street with a pair of virtual reality contact lenses, and you can have whatever experiences you like. That's pretty wild. I mean, why would you travel anymore? Because you can experience the beautiful gardens on your backyard. Any kind of human creation, being it digital or physical, could be experienced through your senses in a full way. I mean, we don't know yet how to generate things like smells and so on that are very important in these kind of experiences. But I think it's only a matter of time when we have some devices that can also emulate all types of sensory input. Another idea that was brought up.
Before you go on that, actually, just to add to that point, I'm trying to remember the author now, but author who went on to do a series of books with kind of transhumanist themes. He, in his first story, he had a detective who he had some kind of cognitive implant, and the way he explained it was that the power of this implant wasn't that it expanded his intellectual capacity necessarily, is to let him focus. And especially to those of us who have a hard time necessarily focusing all the time, that could be very powerful. That if you could put yourself in a certain mode, you could say, okay, today is a day where I really need to write, and I don't want to be distracted by emails or phone calls or by sexual urges or by food or anything. I need to write today. If you could just put yourself in that mode, how powerful would be that? Now, some people can do that, and they're lucky. I mean, I'm not one of those people. It takes me a long time to get into that writing mode. Some of us are not distracted by sex. Some of us find that very distracting. We walk around places and we see too many attractive people and our mind wanders off. Maybe there's certain situations where we want to just switch that off. Other cases, we might want to amplify it. I don't know, but I think actually even at something simple like being able to select from our existing emotional states and physiological responses could be very powerful. Before we even get to the point of expanding that range, and expanding the ability to sense things in remote locations. So you're saying right now, we can't really smell. If we could send out robots to remote locations and it can kind of scan the environment with the camera and the sounds, we can't really smell that very well. I think they tried Smellorama in cinemas, and it's very crude, but eventually probably you can have a full range of virtual senses.
Oh, that's very interesting. So basically, what becomes even more important is your intentions. So what you load your intentions with, what you want to do, those things can be possible. Like, I mean, what you just explained about some, devices or whatever that could put you in the state of focus. This is probably why a lot of people are interested in nootropics, like students in school, if they want to pass their exams, want to read for it. That's probably the reason why they take some of these supplements, just to be able to just have this idea, at least, that I might be able to focus better with something. And I mean, that's also the reason why people drink alcohol. They think they could relax or escape something, or just have a little bit of fun between work. So it's interesting. I mean, this almost reminds me of like psychedelic experiences in a way. It's different modalities of experience that we go through, being it sexual drive or just, the urge to write or whatever. And you can just wake up in the morning, you can choose what kind of experience you're going to have today. And it's going to be extremely powerful. Now, there's definitely going to be people who are going to be opposing this, that are conservative enough that they think that this is not in your hands. I mean, this should be controlled. This is not okay. It's not part of, human experience of things just happening. It's when things become almost surgically possible to control and choose the direction where things are going. It's almost like in politics, people, given the freedom, they will only read the stuff that they already believe in. So they will, even on open internet, if you have a specific political sense, you will sort of gravitate towards the stuff that you already agree with. And even though internet would enable debate and alternative viewpoints, would this be like a new form of entertainment, sort of like what people do anyway today? They watch television for 6 hours a day, and it's releasing the neurotransmitters they like for feeling that they are not lonely because there is this TV anchor and there is this soap TV show, and the dopamine that is released from the experience they experience through the television. Now this becomes direct experience, and they can sort of escape the cruelty or the painful experiences and emotions of the day. Would people choose to do that?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer. I think that there's an obvious danger that if you can choose your internal states, then you might become essentially like a crackhead or a meth addict or someone who takes heroin, where you're essentially reinforcing the same experience, the same feeling over and over. But obviously in those cases, because it has real chemical effects, you're doing yourself a lot of damage.
So this is like digital heroin in a way.
It could be. And that could be, I wouldn't want to say that's something you can't do, because it's someone else's life. They can choose to do that if they wish, as long as they don't expect other people to support them. If they still have productive periods of their time, then who am I to say that they can't spend a lot of time doing that? But I would hope, on the other hand, that one reason why we do that now, one reason why we overdrink, why we take too many tranquilizers or other drugs, why we watch too much crappy reality TV, is because we are so stressed, because our biochemistry is out of whack, because we're living in an environment that we didn't really evolve for. So, but what if we could hack that? What if we could improve our internal processes, so as we go through the day, we're kind of gliding through it with ease, and at the end of the day, whenever that is, we don't really have the need for that kind of, to drink 12 beers or 12 glasses of wine or to watch 6 hours of television. That's gone because we've had a good day, and every day is a good day, and we've been in a flow state pretty much all the time. and we get to choose, whether that flow state is a writing day, whether it's a day of great sex, whether it's a day of hiking, whatever it is. So maybe it'll have the opposite effect. It's kind of hard to say. So
I really hope it's going to be a new renaissance coming, and that all this technology will be sort of like new age of enlightenment in a way that would enable people to actually focus on creativity and art and producing something that we as humans are very unique and capable for.
But one thing I think is really important to emphasize, in this discussion, you talked about those who disapprove of this, but they will often turn out to be the same people who say, well, you shouldn't get to choose, what mental state to be in because you're not responsible enough. We, the experts, the bioethicists on the government committee, George Bush's committee who was against all transhumanist ideas, we should get to make those choices. We should make you good citizens. We should make you want to vote. We should make you want to be responsible. That's where things get frightening. That's why I'm a very strong advocate of the principle of morphological freedom, where we get to choose that. Even though, yes, some people will screw things up. Some people will mess things up and get it wrong. It's a lot worse. History shows it's a lot worse when centralized large power blocks get control of any kind of control technology like that. So we've got to really push, not just for these technologies, but for keeping them in individual hands.
Yeah, it's interesting that now in the US you have this transhumanist party by Sultan Istvan, and so these things are picking up steam in a way. It reminds me of science fiction book actually by Bruce Sterling from '85 called Schismatrix. In Schismatrix, there is like the society is split into kind of two directions.
The biological ones and the more cyborg.
Yes, shapers who are sort of like the biohackers, the group that alters the body through genetic modification, specialized mental training, like mindfulness. And then there is the mechanists who are almost like the quantified selfers, the group that modifies the body through computer software, cybernetics, and external alterations, and the senior mechanists, sort of the highest form, are wireheads who live in permanent virtual reality, who want to upload themselves to the matrix. It's sort of interesting where the world can go from here, because if you think of the people who we chose to power, were those people who we expected to be well informed. The whole idea of having a parliament really is that you have well-informed representatives who are informed by the best among us. And when you have enough of well-informed people, mathematically, they will have over 50% likelihood of making right decisions in situations. And if you have 10, 20, 100 of them, that will diverge towards 100% accuracy in making decisions. But what if those people are not well informed? What if they are manipulated? What if the world is too complex? The issues are too complex that they cannot be well informed. They can't follow their time, and they're too tangled in getting their next year term extended. Then they are not very well informed, and the more you have them, they will actually have less than 50% likelihood of making a right decision. When you put 100 people there, you get to zero. So probably we will definitely need people to represent us who are extended, almost like with sixth senses, that they're an extension of the technology that we have created, the cloud services, the vast amounts of information and database we have, and are supported by artificial intelligence and AI to make the decisions to dive into issues and solve the problems that we face.
If I wasn't so busy doing what I am doing, that'd be the area I'd be working on, because I think it's critical to improve social decision-making processes. You talk about the Transhumanist Party. Well, I don't personally think that working within the party system is going to work very well. I think it's a broken system, and I don't know whether Zoltan will have a good effect or bad. I'm not sure yet. I'll be actually debating him on Reddit in a couple of weeks, and we'll get to talk about some of this stuff. But I would like to see more development of ideas like Robin Hanson's idea futures, which are being used very well in certain areas, basically where people can set a proposition and they can bet on it, and that produces a consensus that is far more accurate than other prediction methods. In fact, a company like HP used it to predict printer sales, and they found that the prediction markets, where anybody can participate, produce results much more accurate than their best experts. And it's been very well used in, I think, the Hollywood Stock Exchange, I think it's called, is used to predict the opening take for a movie, and it does better than any of the experts. Now, if we could somehow pressure governments into using methods like these, kind of proven methods that show better decision-making capabilities and require them to use it, which is part of the Precautionary Principle, by the way, is to use evidence-based procedures for producing better decisions, that will make a big difference. So rather than just hoping that we'll get good candidates in, I think we need to think about actually changing that whole process and basically having high social pressure to make them use the tools that will produce that. And that way they can also, they don't have to bluff and bluster and appeal to emotion so much. They can actually say, well, look, this system, which is being tested and shows good results, is saying we should do this. Despite my constituency not being so much in favor, maybe we should pay attention. And it might take away some of that pressure to play and pander to the crowd.
Oh, thanks for bringing up the prediction markets. That's definitely an interesting form of decision making. There has been a lot of these types of experiments with crowdsourcing and other ways of looking at how we can sort of arrive at a certain answer slightly differently than using expert panels. Experts have their weak points, definitely. Maybe this is a good opportunity also to just revisit a little bit your precautionary principle, and if you could ponder a little bit on that and what does it consist of. So how to be proactive?
Yeah, well, the precautionary principle, this really came out of, I was reading about the precautionary principle, which has just several different versions and has actually been written into the European Constitution. And there's different versions of it, but essentially it says that if some new technology or production process could cause harm, especially if it was irreversible, however you are to determine irreversibility, then it must not be allowed, essentially. And this is just a disastrous way of trying to make decisions. It basically will stop all progress. So we held an online summit. I forget what it's called now, but we had an online summit including people like Marvin Minsky and Ray Kurzweil and others. And out of that, I produced the precautionary principle, which is an alternative and a bit more subtle. It's not as simple as one line. It basically has 7 or 10 sub-principles, but it's really saying that let's take as a given that progress is good. Overall, progress is good. We shouldn't be trying to stop it. We should be helping it. But yes, we need to take precautions. But we cannot just rely on even self-proclaimed experts or even real experts because they get things wrong. We need processes put in place that have actually been tested. That's the only way of knowing whether they work or not. Because there's a lot of expert methods out there that don't work, and a lot of experts that really don't know what's going to happen. They may be the expert in their field. That doesn't mean they know anything very much. But there are methods, and we can devise more of them. It's saying to the extent that we know what those are, let's use those and not rely on public opinion and pressure and that kind of thing. So it's really got a whole sort of set of principles. And if I hadn't taken my current job, I would have been working that into a workbook for companies and governments as to how to actually implement those ideas and work to get those put into practice. So basically, it's a way of saying, let's start with the premise that progress is good, and then let's structure our decision-making according to the best available evidence to make the best decisions.
That actually brings to my mind an interesting case I read from the work of Stafford Beer. Stafford Beer used to be, I think he was a British cyberneticist. He was especially interested and focused on cybernetic management. And in Chile, in the 70s, or it was in the end of 60s, they were working on creating a completely new type of way of running a government under the power of Salvador Allende, who, by the way, was thrown over. But what they were creating was this kind of room. It was sort of like straight from some kind of sci-fi movie. There was like chairs that where decision makers would sit, but those were not politicians, but scientists from different fields. And they would have a conversation. On the chairs, they would have buttons from which they could basically press a button to get their turn to speak. And when they speak, they wouldn't just rely on rhetoric, but data. And the data would be real time. And the whole cybernetic thing would be connected to the country's media and factories and people sitting in front of their televisions. They could press buttons about their feelings of where things are going, and they could use that real-time data to explain things. Press a button and show, hey, this is that, and then the other guy would press a button. I disagree with you. Take a look at this data, and the walls around them would basically project the data coming in, sort of almost like in a Minority Report kind of fashion. And on the chairs, they would have, on the other side, they would have ashtray for cigars, and on the other side, they would have a little spot for a pint, basically. And this was actually something they built and designed, and they applied Bayesian filtering that we nowadays use for spam filtering to the data coming in. And in the end of the 60s, kind of computers, they were actually trying to build this thing. So that was sort of early approach to try to create this kind of like cybernetic kind of government that is able to tap into data and make decisions in a slightly different way than we do them today.
Now, what we don't want is a system that, and there was a novel based on this by a quite well-known writer, where he's essentially got a little earpiece that links into a computer system that gives him instant feedback on what he's saying. So even as he's giving a speech, he can kind of adjust his speech to reflect the reaction he's getting. That's not what we want, because that's just a way of becoming more demagogic. So really, we want more what you're talking about, which is a structured system for analyzing expert opinion, something kind of like the Delphi method, which can work, and it depends on how it's done, but that's a way of filtering expert opinion and giving it revisions and coming up with a better answer. We need a lot more work in those kind of areas, and then we have to find a way of getting politicians and government agencies to use these things, or else firing them. But that'll be the tough part.
Well, looking at our discussion here, I guess there's still a lot of work to do. So let's assume that there's still a lot of things to do, and I would rather wake up, 100 years from now. But I guess my biological body might not live that long, and you are into cryonics and the Alcor Life Extension Foundation, and can you sort of open up a little bit that? So why would I preserve myself and wake myself up? When basically medical science is advanced enough so that I can bring myself back into a world that might be completely transformed with all these things you're talking about.
Well, the way I look at it is that cryonics is just an extension of emergency medicine. Basically, we come along at the point where today's doctors and medicine say, look, there's nothing much more we can do for you. We kind of throw up our hands in despair. We've tried everything. We could maybe revive you temporarily for a few minutes or a few hours. You're going to be miserable. So we're just going to let you go. We're going to call you dead. It's a bit of an arbitrary point. What we're saying is that turn that person over to us. We're going to do all kinds of complicated things I won't get into to stop the patient getting worse. We're going to stabilize their cells. We're going to essentially cryopreserve them at super low temperatures after protecting the cells to prevent freezing damage. They can then wait. It doesn't matter whether it's a year or a century. They're essentially going to be in the same condition. There's no metabolic activity. And that means that they can benefit from far more advanced technology that fix whatever killed them, whether it was a blown blood vessel in the brain or a heart valve or cancer or the aging process itself. So it's really just saying, if you're enjoying life, why let your crappy body decide when you go? You should get that choice. Now, it's not about immortality or living forever. It's about giving you the choice of how long you live. And it's not just a guess that this might work. There's good evidence that using the procedures we use, looking at animal tissue that's been preserved under similar conditions, looking at synaptic tissue, for instance, we can see the connections are intact. And everything we know about memory storage and personality suggests that, at least under good conditions, we are preserving that. And you're still there. You're just potential waiting to come back.
So what are you saying is that a sort of emergency kind of medicine, instead of putting me into coma for 15 years and hoping the best, you basically put me in deep freeze for 100 years and wait for the technology to develop so that I can actually be saved?
Well, the 15-year coma option isn't really an option, really, because you're still going to be aging. Even if we could put you in a coma without killing you, which, in most cases of terminal conditions isn't going to be possible, you'd still be aging. And so, if you're dying of old age, that wouldn't help. But with cryopreservation, we're literally stopping all biochemical activity. Once we get below about minus 120 degrees C, nothing is happening anymore. So you can really wait indefinitely, even thousands of years, but I don't think that'll be necessary. But the way I think of it is that when we say that someone is dead today, we're actually wrong. And I think you mentioned, or maybe it was before we started recording, my dissertation, I had a whole chapter on the concept of death. And you realize that what we say dead has changed over time. So before 1960, for instance, if someone was nearby you and they stopped breathing, their heart stops beating, we would have checked their pulse and we would have said, oh, this person's dead, and we would have buried them or cremated them. Today, we don't do that because we have things like CPR, defibrillation. We bring them back to life, and in most cases they're fine. So we can say, well, 50 years ago, were they really dead? Well, not by today's standards. And so the point is that by the future standards, people we call dead today are not dead either. They will be if we don't do something to stop them getting worse. And that's where cryonics comes in, really, is to stop things getting worse. But it's not something we want to do. I do not want to be cryopreserved. I'd rather not die in the first place. I'm very interested in health, longevity, doing whatever I can to live longer. I'm hoping there'll be enough funding and effort into life extension research that, before I get too old, that'll slow down and stop and reverse, and I won't need to be cryopreserved. But I might need it. So that's really why I'm taking over running the organization, to make sure it's here when I need it.
What does that do to society in a way? Because, does it make any sense if it doesn't make any sense to age anymore? I would not get old. There's not this kind of natural cycle that we go through in life. If everyone would basically be stuck at 25 years or whatever age they choose, what happens to generations, and so on? I guess there's a lot to human experience that comes with aging.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know, but I look forward to finding out. If you think about it, things have already changed now. In that, for most places, most societies over most of history, people generally didn't live very long. Now, quite often, we have many generations living. That's already changing the way family structures work. Used to be people would be put to work at the age of 5 or 6, and now that be considered outrageous. Now you've got to go through 18 years of education or 21 years of education. So those kind of things obviously will change. I think there will be a time when we consider someone who's 30 years old to be basically still not really responsible, and they may have a bit of a different status. Things will change like that, but I think we'll handle those changes. So yeah, you won't be able to tell how old someone is by looking at them, but once you start talking to them, I think you'll get a sense of what kind of depth there is there, and there'll be other ways of telling. So things will certainly be different. How exactly, I'm not sure. There are issues that have to be addressed, like people are worried about gerontocracy. Won't the top leaders of the world just stay at the top, and people will calcify? Well, no, not if we have term limits, not if we can throw them out, not if we can enforce those changes, which we already do to a certain degree. So anyway, those are, if there are problems like that, I'm quite happy to deal with them rather than be dead.
Right.
Seems
right.
like
Yeah.
it's a better alternative.
To me, it's not really the point to live forever, but live a quality life. And if that means that when I'm older, I'm still able to do some physical activities as if I'm young, and I would be able to solve problems and work on things that I love without having issues with memory and attention and energy and so on, that would be fantastic. So all of us have different reasons for these things, and I guess to summarize our discussion in some way, it's not certainly an easy topic that is free of really hard ethical questions. But in the end, if we just look at what the individuals may want in their lives, to experience as many different things, perhaps live a quality life, and also as the human enterprise create things that and go beyond that no other life form has gone, at least on this planet, that would be feasible, and it's absolutely at least possible. So why not try to do that and make that into something you live and breed, basically. And we don't know enough yet, and definitely as we tinker with these things, some people will die, just like in bodybuilding. There's always this guy who took too much of that supplement or tried a technique that didn't work out. But in the end, there's always someone who comes through and uh, has stands on the shoulders of the others and uh, provide something to the next generations. So
You
I'd
know,
like to.
one thing to keep in mind, if I just very briefly interject there, a lot of people, one thing they don't take into consideration is it's just appalling right now that over time, our wisdom goes up. We learn more and more over time. We figure things out, but our physical health and mental health is going down at the same time.
Hmm.
That's kind of a crazy, ridiculous situation. What if we could fix that? What if we could beat the aging process, or if you don't make it, come back through cryopreservation, and then you keep that wisdom, you keep that learning, you enhance it through biohacking, through all the additions we can make, and you maintain that vibrancy of youth. You maybe even enhance it beyond what you ever had. So you've got increasing wisdom and increasing physical vitality. What kind of world would that be?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it sort of ironic that we first invented technology to make our lives easier, and as a result, we probably, for example, today we eat the worst food ever, and we also eat the best food ever. We have two options, and also our lifestyles. I mean, we can live the best possible lifestyle ever anyone has ever before us lived, and you can have the worst possible lifestyle and you can die of obesity and heart disease as a young kid. So I really do hope that this technology sort of is our savior in a way, that it will enable us to take a good look at ourselves. If it means it's some watch on your hand that tells you stand up, you've been sitting too long. Maybe it is some virtual reality glasses that help you to do your work while you are moving instead of just sitting in front of your computer all the time. Whatever it is that liberates us from the negative side effects of technological progress, that would be awesome. And if it really makes us more conscious about how to use technology in a way that is actually beneficial to ourselves and to our environment as well. I'm a big believer. I'm optimistic in technology and its ability to take us to a new level.
And there's a whole other area which you probably don't have to touch on, but just to mention briefly that one problem we have, I mean, you said the technology itself can be helpful, but the ways we apply it is obviously critical. And we've talked about social mechanisms for better decision making, but on an individual level, we have a big problem in that we've evolved this little 3-pound piece of meat that's not really optimized for the modern world. It's not very good at making complex decisions. Well, we need to start thinking about re-engineering that. We don't have the tools really to do that right now, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. I think we can make better decisions by, for instance, interconnecting the cognitive and emotional areas of the brain more deeply. Right now, they're not very well connected. We tend to, because we evolve essentially to respond to threats by, seeing something, feeling something. It makes us think, run. So we get fearful all the time. We get anxiety in inappropriate times. We don't think things through carefully. So one day it may be feasible to actually restructure the brain, put in new pathways. So doing that along with better social decision-making mechanisms, maybe we'll really start to improve the world and solve some problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that brings to my mind one thought that Amal Grafstra put forward. He spoke at Biohacker Summit last year. He invented the implantable RFID chip. But anyway, so he said that maybe we could in the future have new types of sensory experiences. So right now our mobile phones are hijacking our existing senses, like with vibration or sound, different kind of alerts and notifications that basically hijack our hearing or our sight or our sense of touch. What if we could have just, very subtle feelings, just like, the temperature in my bedroom is now too high. Maybe I want to go and adjust that, or that my friends are 2 miles away and are approaching where I am, and without having to pick up the phone, without having to do anything that would disturb the environment when someone picks up a phone or gets a SMS or text message. what if we could have this kind of sensory experience? So then anything that can be computed and transmitted as information could be brought to you with these kind of subtle feelings, just like they have actually created now this type of like a leg kind of band that goes around your feet that has magnets, and it basically vibrates to the direction where north is. So you will always know after a couple of months. You no longer pay attention to the sensation, but your brain basically starts to understand that as direction. So you always know where north is.
Oh, I need that. I have no sense of direction. I need that. Yeah.
Yeah, so new types of sensory experiences. But anyway, we could talk for a long time, and I think we will definitely continue this conversation, go deeper even at the Biohacker Summit. It's going to be in Helsinki, 23rd to 24th of September. Max Moore is going to be there. It's going to be a phenomenal event. We have a lot of interesting people coming from all around the world over there. I see now signups of people from about 15 countries. Also in the attendee list, there's going to be a lot of interesting people over there. So everyone who ever is listening to this, you're most welcome. So check out biohackersummit.com. Now, Max, I like to ask people, like, what would be like your life lessons? So if you would pick up a couple of things that you would teach to your children or grandchildren or whatever yourself when you were younger, what would those things be that have been helpful to you in terms of just thinking about living a better life?
Oh my goodness, you're putting me on the spot here to boil it down to a couple of principles like that. Just ask me again when I give my talk at the conference, I'll come up with better answers. But I suppose one critical thing in my experience is don't worry too much about what other people think. Pursue your own line of thinking. Read widely. Don't just listen to any one source. As you mentioned, a lot of people read the same news source or reinforce their opinion. Don't do that. Deliberately put yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable, where you look at different perspectives and really consider them. Don't worry about opinion at all. Look at evidence. When people are arguing with you or you're reading something you agree or disagree with, ask yourself, what is the actual evidence here? Let me check out the evidence, because people will be very persuasive, but that's irrelevant to reality. Look at the evidence. Explore different areas of life, try different things. Don't get stuck in a rut. Take good care of yourself, right? It doesn't matter how young you are. There are plenty of kids in really bad shape right now. That's critical to everything. Anything you might want to do in the future, you're going to do it better. You may not be able to do it at all because you may be dead if you don't take care of yourself. Take good care of yourself. And again, evidence is very important in learning what that means, because clearly a lot of the official medical authorities and what they've told us about health has been wrong because we're a very unhealthy population now. So think for yourself. So on the spot, those are some of the core things that I would come up with.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. I would definitely write down those things into my life's manual. So thank you, Max Moore, for joining for this interview.
Thank you, Timmy. I appreciate it.
It was infinite pleasure, and see you in Helsinki, Finland, September.
I look forward to it very much.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much.
Take care.